Hello and welcome to La Course on Tête podcast. As always, we welcome Peloton subscribers and Aérogramme listeners. I'm OJ Borg, a proud owner of four KOMs on Strava. And yes, I am thinking of setting up a coaching company. Alongside me is somebody voted sexiest cycling journalist, 4 years on the trot. It's Jeremy Whittle. Hi, Jeremy.
I think you got this round the wrong way.
No way. Come on. I know you have. Or was it 5 years? Was it 5 years? Oh, no, you were disqualified on the 5th years for being too much of a beefcake.
I cheated. I took too much Botox.
Also, Jeremy writes books and stuff. Alongside him, well, not in reality, but on the other side of the planet, in an undisclosed Australian location, is cycling journalist and someone who can't even go for a jog without turning it into a drama. It's Sophie Smith. Hi, Sophie.
Well, hello.
Hi.
And I agree, like, Jez, you are a fine specimen. Would have been 5 years for sure.
Five years ago, maybe, yeah. But
Oh, you are still the hottest man on the planet, Jeremy. You know that.
This is like going the wrong way. So let's get back to the cycling. Come on.
Let's do
OJ,
that.
OJ, you still don't know where I live either, do you?
Oh, it's something Australian.
What?
Is it north?
Every
Is it south?
podcast we go through this. You tell me.
Ramsey Street.
Or same city, yeah, I'll give you that.
What are we doing on this podcast? Well, we're trying to encapsulate the emotion felt in the Ineos team car. Before we get into everything that's going on, let's head to the hot take leather armchair for the latest high drama from William Fotheringham and all the news.
Well, here I am in my club chair with my gin and tonic at the end of another surreal week as professional cycling continues to duck and dive its way through the pandemic. This should have been Super Sunday, but given the drama in the Giro and the Vuelta, perhaps it's as well for the sake of our collective hearts that we didn't have a wet Paris-Roubaix to drool over as well. The Giro made it to Milan, the second Grand Tour out of two in this rejig season to be decided in the final time trial. 2.5 weeks ago, you'd have thought this was going to be another race where Ineos would be playing catch-up after losing their leader, Geraint Thomas. Instead, we ended up with a massive win for Tao Geoghegan Hart. I bet no one would have predicted that 3 weeks ago. To back that up, Ineos took the lead at the Vuelta with Richard Carapaz after Primož Roglic, remember him, cracked on the climb at Formigal. Earlier, the Giro had a rather chaotic riders' strike on Friday, in which no one seemed to know what was happening, and that after a stage of high drama on the Stelvio on Thursday, probably the most spectacular images of a mountain climb we will see this year. We've got a new star to contemplate in Jai Hindley, second overall in the Giro. Chris Froome is on domestique duty at the Vuelta, and CCC finally took a World Tour win on Friday at the Giro with Josef Czerny. We've got one Grand Tour left this year, and just to whet all our appetites, this week we find out where the Tour de France is headed in 2021. Let's just hope we're back to some sort of normality by then.
Thank you very much to William Fotheringham there. Let's start with this Giro showdown then. Let's get out of the way. Jeremy, who called it? Who was going to win? Go on, Jeremy.
Well, I think a multitude of people called it, if I'm honest. But
On this podcast.
Well, on this podcast, I did, obviously. I mean, that goes without saying. But I think we knew, didn't we? We knew kind of midway in the race. I did a little calculation earlier on about where Tao Geoghegan Hart was in the we're going through a myriad of pronunciations of his name, but where he was as the race went along, he was 126 after the first stage, the time trial in Sicily.
Because at that point, though, he wasn't supposed to be racing for the win. He was racing.
No, I mean that's what's so remarkable about this is that you look at all these grand tours we've all watched over the years where they have a prologue or they have a team time trial, and you say, and I used to do this thing where I'd highlight the positions of the team leaders after like 4 or 5 stages, and see how far they were, and then see how they moved on the GC as the race went on. So you get a highlighter pen and you'd pick out, Chris Froome, he's lost 1.5 minutes. And so ultimately, that's kind of meaningless, really, because in the end, it does come down to this thing. And you said it was a cliche when I mentioned it earlier on, but it does come down to where you are on the final stage. And he went from 126 to winning the Giro.
Yeah,
and that's quite an extraordinary statistic, really. I know it is meaningless in a way because when he was 126, he was there to help Geraint Thomas, but it's still a remarkable move. And incredibly, he was still fourth 3 minutes from the Jersey on the eve of the Stelvio stage. And what really turned the race around for him was his performance and Rohan Dennis's performance, which was extraordinary as well on the Stelvio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's do the top three of the standings. Tao, I'm going to go with your pronunciation, Jeremy. Tao Geoghegan Hart of Ineos Grenadiers. Second, Jai Hindley, Team Sunweb at 39 seconds down. Then Wilco Kelderman, again of Team Sunweb, was 1:29 down. A man who we thought possibly at one point was going to win it. Sophie, where does it stand, this final time trial? Where does it stand in the pantheon of thrilling finishes of Grand Tours?
Oh, it was huge. Not only because you had two, I don't know about new, but certainly young faces coming in on like the same time. I don't know if that had ever happened before. And then Filippo Ganna winning and breaking his own like Grand Tour Giro record for it. Yeah, it was a big day in terms of like, I don't know if I've ever been to a Grand Tour where I've like the last stage has been anything other than a formality.
I think the other thing for me that's amazing is that it's such a comeback for Dave Brailsford and his team, the Ineos Grenadier team, because we exited the Tour de France and it was all woe and despair and gloom because Bernal had failed and they were kind of like, Chris Froome's leaving and Geraint Thomas is out of form and he's got to get ready for the Giro, and Carapaz, Richard Carapaz, who's now leading the Vuelta. That also happened this afternoon. He took a consolation stage, which was a consolation prize. And this afternoon they won the Giro. They won 7 stages. Ganna took his fourth stage. 3 of them are time trials, and in Spain they usurped Primož Roglič and took over the lead in the Vuelta. So I don't think there's been much better Sundays for Dave Brailsford and for that team.
Has Sir Dave Brailsford been proved right again?
Well, I think he's got lucky again. I mean, I think you can look at that and say the stars definitely aligned for Tao, because basically you had a race where he came in. He's a very capable rider. Everybody knows that. One of the things I would say about him, and I want to say this evening, is that I've been hoovering up information from people over the weekend because I've been writing bits and pieces about him and talking to people who've known him for a long time. He is incredibly well liked. I think there's few more popular Grand Tour winners of recent years. So a lot of people are very pleased that he's won a Grand Tour. But he got lucky. They got lucky in a way because the combination of circumstances, the number of riders who dropped out of the Giro, and then also the performances of some of the riders who are still there, like Kelderman, like Nibali, the old hands like Fulzang, the guys who you'd expect to be contenders for the podium, slipped away. And then it came down to these two young guys. I mean, Sophie, what's the feeling on Australia? Is it seen as a disappointment or a fantastic performance?
I think it'd be a fantastic performance. The Giro here, in terms of mainstream press, doesn't necessarily get a lot of coverage. And unfortunately for Jai Hindley, this week coincided with the NRL and AFL Grand Finals. So he perhaps hasn't got as much coverage as, I'm going to pronounce Tao Geoghegan Hart. I don't know. I'm just going to say Tao.
I've only heard it that way.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
I've only heard it that way. It's Jeremy who's put me off with this Geoghegan.
But I think it's still an amazing performance. Like Hindley's still, I think, only the second ever Australian to finish on the final podium at the Giro behind Cadel Evans. So in terms of from a national perspective, that's huge. And to be honest, I've heard of Geoghegan Hart working with British press for a long time. His name's been around for a long time. His talent's always been talked up. I haven't heard a lot about Jai Hindley at all. And looking at his results, he won the Herald Sun Tour at the beginning of this year. And apart from that, in terms of what I guess we would classify significant victories, he hasn't really won anything. So I think for him to come out this year of all years and put on a performance like this, I've heard some audio from him post-race, he sounded very disappointed. But I'm hoping he kind of looks back and sort of gives himself a pat on the back.
Let's focus on both these riders individually in just a second, starting with Tao Geoghegan Hart. But I just want to ask one thing, because Jeremy, you're talking about luck. You're talking about luck with a team. And if ever there was a team in cycling, and I'm asking this to you, Sophie, if ever there was a team in cycling that doesn't get lucky, it's Ineos. And it's any team that's coached or it's run by Sir Dave Brailsford. I mean, is he right? Is Jeremy right when he says they were lucky, that they rode it right?
It's a special year, isn't it? I think they selected well. And if luck comes into it, I would say it sort of came into it in that they started in Ghana, they had that winning memento with him from the beginning. And maybe even just what happened with the tour, they kind of took that in their stride a bit more. Was it a newer team? So maybe they've just found something, a different culture together on the road. You don't necessarily associate Ineos with luck, no. But I think people also have a tendency to put Ineos on a pedestal. And if this season showed us anything, it is that they are fallible and there are other teams out there that are catching up. And this race certainly wasn't won in the way they usually would. I mean, we haven't seen negative racing at all this season. They haven't been able to dictate terms.
No, but at the same time, I'm not saying they didn't kind of deserve a bit of good luck in a way, because they've had, I mean, they obviously had the worst luck in the world at the start when their team leader got taken out by a full water bottle just running across the road. I mean, it's a freak accident. I mean, we've seen it happen to riders before, the crash that befell Geraint Thomas on the stage to Mount Etna. But to recover from that in the way that they have is really extraordinary. And I think it's, well, it shows you their kind of qualities, regardless of bike riding. It shows you their qualities as professionals who don't give up. They don't throw in the towel. You know, they regroup and they think again. They reset, as they like saying, and they absolutely. I think it's a fantastic example of kind of how, if you stick at something, you know, you can get there in the end. But at the same time, you know, we did lose kind of half a dozen really of the riders. When we sat around at the start of the race and we were doing our previews, we did name half a dozen riders who we thought would be potential contenders for the podium. Tao Geoghegan Hart was not really up there. And I think at the same time that you'd say that, you know, Vincenzo Nibali, Simon Yates, Kelderman, etc., were. So, yeah. And they in the end, they fell away.
I mean, it helps when you've got the best funded team in the peloton as well. That definitely helps. We've talked about him a lot. Let's hear from the new owner of a lovely pink cycling shirt and one of the most beautiful trophies in all of sport to go with it. Here is Tao, insert your own pronunciation, Hart.
Yeah, I have no idea what I should say, Bernie, but yeah, I mean, look at this, it's spectacular. Been an incredible 3 weeks, and I didn't believe this was possible this morning, but here we are, so wow.
How nervous were you last night already and this morning?
Last night I felt really relaxed. This morning I had that strange 2 hours in the room on my own, trying not to overthink it and just listening to some good music and stuff, but that was the only moment where, yeah, a little bit the moment was sinking in, but otherwise, yeah, it was a pretty simple TT, go through the process and whatever happened.
Asking about, you know, Bradley, he sent you his voice note, and what was going through your mind on these 15 kilometers today?
Yeah, I mean, Brad gave me super advice just to focus on myself and focus on the process, however boring that sounds. The same with G, he sent me a super nice text last night. And yeah, I mean, those are guys I've looked up to near enough half my life. They're the ones that inspired me to get here, and watching this team inspired me, watching you guys smash it in the Tour. So sorry we took your Grand Tour record today, stage wins, but you'll I'm sure you'll live.
I was only part of it, but you won it, but also you will inspire many kids now, especially in Hackney. Hackney is going to be on fire tonight.
I hope so, yeah. I mean, I would love to see more cycling as a sport in London, more diversity in cycling that can definitely come from the sport increasing in popularity in cities like London. So I think this is an amazing sport. It takes you to incredible places, you meet unbelievable people. So yeah, I hope I can inspire a few kids in Hackney to dream big, even if it's not in cycling.
Last question, dream big, party big tonight?
I think there's a curfew from 11 p.m, so we'll see what happens, but we're not going to break any COVID rules, Bernie.
We've all spoken about how popular he is as a winner. Did he work at the Condor Cycling Shop in London? Is that where he worked? I'm pretty sure, I only read that today. I'm pretty sure I might have been served by him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I got served by him as well once. I took him to task about why they didn't sell my books.
And what was his answer?
I don't think he knew what I was talking about. He didn't know. He didn't know what I was talking about. But no, I remember going in there, and he'd be kind of like, he was there at the weekends, I think. And if you ever needed, it was one of those shops where you either go to make a really big purchase, like wheels or a frame or something. I did buy a bike from them a few years ago, or you go and just kind of, because they're in central London, you go in there and you pick up an inner tube or, some gels or something like that, or a cap. It's one of those shops where you're either, it's a great shop and you're either going in to buy, as I say, high-end purchase, or just something that you need on the road.
The problem is, we look at what happened last season, where we talked all about Egan Bernal. That's it. Road racing's over. He's going to win 5,000 tours. He's going to win every single GC going. Everyone else might retire now. What is the future for Tao Geoghegan Hart?
I think it's incredibly difficult for him to see it clearly now. And certainly, I'm sure they'll be going away now and thinking, okay, we've got Bernal, we've got Carapaz, we've got Adam Yates coming in. Now we've got Tao. Now we've got kind of like Geraint Thomas in the twilight years, who's still probably determined to win another Grand Tour before he hangs up his wheels. So they've got a multitude of leaders, and they've got to make a plan. Obviously, it looks like Carapaz is on storming form in Spain. He's looked really good since the race began. I don't know how much you two have seen of it, but he's looked really excellent, and he's looked really aggressive and fired up, and he looks like the guy who won the Giro now, rather than the guy who kind of was and also ran at the Tour. So yeah, I think they've definitely got leadership issues. Before
we get on, I want to talk about the changing of the guard, which we seem to have talked about on the last 3 podcasts. The fact that kids are now going to win everything. First, though, I want to hear this. This is how much it meant to Ineos for this win. Here's the DS of Ineos. This is Ollie Cookson.
Good evening, everyone. We've just won the Giro with Tao, and the whole team have just ran to the podium to watch him celebrate, and what an emotional roller coaster of a month it's been, from losing G to then fighting back to looking at winning stages, but with also the objective of what we knew with Tao having such a good talent and was capable of a very solid GC ride, to then put that with no pressure, just managed him throughout the race, and he managed himself well and chipped away each time, and we were slowly moving up the GC, and then for it to come down to a finish like this, with not only the team winning 7 stages, with also the team classification, and then of course winning on the final stage like this, and chapeau to Sunweb, chapeau to Jai Hindley and the way they rode as well. It must have been an amazing battle to watch on TV, and we're all over the moon. We've worked so hard, and we've all been fighting, whether it be for getting in the breaks or whether it be for the TTs or for the GC, and a lot of work's gone into this and a lot of planning, and well, at the end of the day, chapeau to Tao. He's the one with the engine, with the talent, and all the other riders that have worked for him and around him. It's been an incredible month, and here we are in Piazza del Duomo in Milano celebrating. Cheers.
Ollie Cookson there. We've talked about the changing of the guard. In fact, we've probably spoken about it more than the guy who sorts out the rote of the people at Buckingham Palace. Is it now a thing then? Froome, Nibali, Pinot, Fuglsang, Thomas, Wilco Kelderman himself. Is anyone over 33 now? Yesterday's Poisson a Pomfrey rapper, Sophie?
Well, I'm the same age as Thomas, so I don't want to say yes, because I'm implying that I'm getting older as well. But there's definitely been a changing of the guard. Yes. And I think the younger riders, they now have the results to back that up themselves. And they're also really confident. They're not really coming into these races and saying, I'm here for the experience anymore. They're racing like they belong there, and it's working for them. I don't know if I'm with Jez. I think Thomas would want another Grand Tour before he hangs it up. And I think he potentially has one in him. But the likes of Vincenzo Nibali, I don't want to be that person that calls someone's career. I don't think you can do that. But
go on, Sophie, dare you?
No, I can't. I can't see the shark, staying in the white water.
Is it safe to go back in the water? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, I think there is a changing of the guard, yes. And I think this new crop, it's hard to beat them now. But then again, this is a very unique year with unique circumstances, and things could revert to normal next season. Hierarchies could be the same, people could be in the race, whatever. But I don't think that takes away from any victories at the Giro or any other race this season.
Do you not see though, Jeremy? Do you not see that? You see the big teams who've won with kids. They've won with very young riders. I mean, this was a great fact that you sent to me. Last time a winner and the runner-up of a single Grand Tour were and would have been eligible for the under 25 classification, younger than 25 or turned 25 that year, was in 1994. It was at the Giro with Evgeny Berzin and Marco Pantani. Jai Hindley and Tao Geoghegan Hart were both 25 or younger. I mean, are we saying now that if you're over 33, you are possibly never going to win another Grand Tour?
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because Roglic is Roglic 31 next birthday, I think.
30, I think. Yeah, 31.
So next birthday, he'll be 31. And, you know, you'd say, wouldn't you, like 18 months ago, we thought he was the coming man. And now he almost looks like he's racing against time. Thibaut Pinot, I think, is 31 next birthday, if he's not already 31. And
you put in the line at 30.
Well, he's had Pinot's had a disastrous year, hasn't he? Because the Tour was a washout because of the crash on the first day and the back injury. And then he's gone into the Vuelta and apparently his back is still not right. And he quit the Vuelta as well. So there's, you know, is he ever going to, and the things he said at the Tour as well about, you know, I have to, give up on my dream kind of thing. That was the meaning, the subtext of that. You know, is it getting a younger man's game? And I think maybe what's the specific thing about this year is it's required people to be incredibly adaptable and to think on the hoof. And we've all had to be in all our lives because of lockdown, because of all the restrictions. We've all had to adapt and we've all had to change quickly. It's harder when you're older. I know that. Adapting to change is once you get beyond a certain point, it's like, oh gosh, you know, this is a bit too much for fags, a bit too much of an effort. And I guess if you're 24, 23, 24, 25, you're much more ready to kind of like just roll with the punches than you are for 35, definitely.
So in that case, Jeremy, because we're looking at next year, and we're going to talk about this later on. We're looking at 2021. You know, budgets are being squeezed. We don't know what's happening with the world. We're still in a weird place. Why invest all the money in someone like Chris Froome, who is, I mean, how much is he being paid? What are they paying him at Israel Startup Nation? It's millions.
I don't know. Yes, it's a lot. Yeah,
it's millions. Why do that when you can get an up-and-coming 24, 25, 23, 22-year-old rider and then base your team around them?
Well, I don't know. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because Mark Cavendish is on the market again. And, you know, Patrick Lefevere at the De Koenig Quickstep team, or Elegant Quickstep team, as I think they now are. He was saying, my heart says yes in terms of signing Cavendish. My head says no. And you know, what you get when you sign a rider of that kind of legendary stature, whether it's Cavendish or Froome, is you get a brand ambassador who said, you know, it's what they say about your ambition and your team. I personally don't think Chris Froome will win another Grand Tour, and I don't think Mark Cavendish will win another big one-day race either. But whether they bring, you know, kind of gravitas to the team and mentorship, and the fact that, you know, other riders will want to go there because they'll be in the shadow of these legendary riders, that's a different thing. But in terms of, are they guaranteed in terms of bringing success on the road? You'd have to say probably not.
I'd agree with that. A team like Israel Startup Nation, where they're new to the World Tour, signing Chris Froome for them, I think would be 50-50, that they think he could get a result and also that he would bring an increased level of stature.
It guarantees entries, doesn't it? You know, you're guaranteed an entry into the biggest races because you've got Chris Froome or Mark Cavendish on your books. So that's, I mean,
I think with Froome, there's a question that he could still win. Cavendish, I'm not sure. The sentiment seems to be that he's, you know, perhaps closer to retirement than Froome is. But
hang on, last time we did a podcast, weren't we talking about Mark Cavendish retiring end of the game for him? Is he back in again?
He's on the market.
Okay.
He wants to be back in again, but so far as I know, unless Jez has other intel, he's still on the market. And the market is quite tough. I've spent the week interviewing rider agents, and they said a few teams have operated all year as business as normal. Some have, like Edge2R, have more money to spend. And others, there were like 3 teams that sort of around April, when, you know, the sky was falling and the world was shutting down, couldn't do anything, couldn't negotiate at all, weren't even sure if they'd, you know, see out the season, let alone 2021.
I mean, one thing that's interesting, and I wanted to talk to you about, Sophie, was whether teams that are kind of more remotely based from the European scene, e.g. Australian teams such as Mitchelton Scott, whether it's going to be in some ways harder for them. A French, it strikes me that a French team or a Belgian team can kind of just ensconce themselves in Europe, and they can get through the season. They can do their training camps. They can do all their get-togethers. They can keep the sponsors happy because they can drive to all of these races. You know, they can take a bus or a car. They don't even have to fly. They can do it all on the road if they need to. If you're a Latin American team or a Latin American rider or an Australian rider, it's a whole new ball game, isn't it? With all the restrictions and the travel, the quarantine periods. And you were saying we were speaking earlier on, weren't we, about the Tour Down Under and the races in Australia and how they'll be affected by all the quarantine laws.
Yeah, for the Australian riders in teams or foreign riders in teams outside of like the continent, I'm not sure it's such a big issue because most of them live abroad anyway. Like most Australians, when the UAE tour, for example, when we got put on lockdown in February, I started a WhatsApp group with the Australian riders and DSs that were there in case we needed consular assistance or whatever. And most of them aren't Australian citizens anymore. Very proud Australians, but they live abroad and some of them don't even really come back here anymore. In terms of Down Under, there's still a big question mark over that, like the whole Aussie summer of cycling that we have here. The races before that will all hinge on what happens at Down Under, because if teams do come out, they will almost certainly have to quarantine. It's hard for me. I'm in Victoria at the moment. We're on a very harsh lockdown, so my perception of reality is quite dwarfed compared to the rest of the country or the world at the moment. But even in South Australia, the organisers are saying teams will definitely have to quarantine. Now, you have some of the bigger squads that come out every year, like Ineos and Mitchelton Scott do the same thing, I think, and they get like an Airbnb, which is out of Central Adelaide, where the race is centred at the one hotel, the Hilton. And they would normally come out sometimes at the end of December, sometimes start of January, and they kind of make a bit of a team camp out of it. They train here because the weather's nice. They do Down Under. They often come to Victoria after that and do the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. They spend, ends up being a good sort of block, a month or so out here. So the general consensus is that they would have to quarantine. So you could assume that, okay, then maybe they could do that and that's not that much different. But then you have to work out logistics, like can they train while they quarantine? Is that a possibility? Then they're saying that there won't be the one centralized hotel anymore. So then you've got to accommodate however many teams across the city, and there's finances that come into it. Like some of the women's teams, generally on a good year, some of them struggle to pay to come out to Australia, let alone in a pandemic. So it's all very much up in the air still, I think.
I mean, but then they have to quarantine when they come back as well, don't they? Not in every circumstance. Yeah, but
and I guess, we're coming into summer here, but Europe, the UK going into winter, then the landscape again in a month's time, in 2 months' time, in January could be very different. Maybe teams won't be allowed to leave Europe. I don't know.
What's your gut feeling? Is the Australian summer of cycling, as you call it, is that going to happen?
Not as we know it, no. The races before, like the Australian National Championships, the Bay Crits, which is sort of just a bit of a local hit out, really. Some of the World Tour pros do to warm up their legs. The dates of those depend on whether Down Under, not whether a Down Under happens, but what dates the teams that compete would have to quarantine. I haven't spoken to anyone about the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race. It happens after Down Under, but being in Victoria and the way they're going at the moment, I'm still not allowed to go more than 25k from my house and do anything other than see a doctor and go grocery shopping. So
is that going to hit Australian sponsors' interest, do you think, or will it kind of be a blow but not fatal?
Don't think it'd be fatal because it's, particularly with Down Under, it's sponsored by the government as well, by the tourism board. So for them, they'd be okay. And the National Road Championships, and I think everyone would be okay. It'd be a blow for sure.
So just listening to what you're saying there, Sophie, if 2020 has been a roller coaster of emotion, where the roller coaster has got stuck and everyone's wondered what's going to happen, 2021 is where the roller coaster starts again and then barrels straight off the edge and erupts into a ball of flame, but everyone's okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I think everyone at this point is just sort of grateful that we've had. I think you have to be grateful that we've had a season. Yeah. I mean, I'm mentally fried. I need to I don't know.
Up until I struggled to watch 2 Grand Tours at the same time, I was, unpopular opinion, really enjoying having all of this racing at the back end of the season. I found it brilliant that I could watch a Grand Tour and then something else would be happening. I loved the fact that if I was bored with a stage of the Giro, I could watch a one-day race. I loved the fact that in between the Tour and the Giro starting was the World Championships. And I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I have sort of enjoyed the season as it's happened. I think, Sophie, you have said something similar.
I've enjoyed the the racing, yeah, and I think teams and riders have gone out and not known if this stage is going to be their last stage. So they seem to have just raced this whole negative racing, this whole, oh, we're playing the long game. It's gone out the window, and everyone's sort of literally taken it day by day, and raced hard day by day, because we didn't know if the next stage was going to happen, if the race was going to, you know, make it to Milan or Paris or Madrid or whatever. So racing wise, I found it really refreshing. Yeah. I don't know if I ever want to cover like 2 Grand Tours in the same week.
Oh God, I've
from
really
Australia again. Anyway, I haven't slept in days, but but in terms of the actual racing, I've loved it.
Did you know that since the end of August, we've only had like 14 days without a Grand Tour? The tour started on the 29th of August, then the Giro started on the 3rd of October, and the Vuelta ends on the 8th of November, and we've only had like 14 days when there wasn't any Grand Tour racing. So it was basically, there was hardly time to take stock. And now we've had this ridiculous situation for the last few days where we had 2 Grand Tours going at the same time. I don't think that's, I mean, I know they wanted to get the races done, but I still think that's kind of crazy where you've got the Vuelta and the Giro going at the same time.
That's the other thing with 2021 though, is that the season finishes on the 8th of November. If you think about it, the turnaround between finishing the Vuelta, recovering, going to a training camp, and being out in Australia to do a race in the middle of January, I wouldn't want to be doing that. That's a tall order. That changes everyone's protocols again, like that, you know, that makes for an irregular off season as well if you're only finishing, you know, the regular season mid-November.
Well, I think it doesn't really matter the protocols thing. If you're Dave Brailsford, you just hug everybody anyway because you're so happy because you just won the Giro and you're winning the Vuelta.
You mentioned the Giro. We never wrapped up the Giro. We had a big, long chat about it. We'll wrap up the Giro by hearing from Marco Pastonesi. We've heard from him all the way through this Giro, that authentic take on what's been happening on the ground. And let's do it again. He spoke to William Fotheringham.
So welcome once again to Marco Pastonesi, the writer who has been our guide through this Giro d'Italia. Marco, what did you make of the final weekend of racing of the Giro? I mean, to me, it was just an amazing showdown.
Yeah, it was very, very exciting. And there were so many things to be talked about and to be discussed and to be loved. And obviously the mountains, even the strike or something like that, and until the end, because the last pink jersey was a matter of a few seconds right at the end. So it was a perfect thriller, and I really love it.
From an Italian perspective, it's not been the best of Giros, I don't think. I mean, it's the first time ever that there has been no Italian in the first 5. And obviously Vincenzo Nibali, who we all hoped would do so well, he didn't quite live up to expectations. Where does this Giro leave cycling in Italy?
Well, I think that the value of the Giro d'Italia, this Giro d'Italia, was not agonistic, was not just sport, but it was a sort of a mission. And as I told you before, it was a rebirth. It was a return to the life. It was something like it was the Giro d'Italia just after the Second World War in the 1946, when there was no Tour de France, but the Giro d'Italia was, and was raised among the ruins of the country. And here there was not the war, but it was another war. It was it's a medical, chemical, healthy, unhealthy war. And so this is the real value of the Giro d'Italia. And I'm so frustrated and so sorry that not all the riders could understand this extra value of the Giro d'Italia. So it's what happened a couple of days ago when they striked for shorten the stage, and it was a real shame. It was a real shame. But everybody in Italy could understand the importance of this Giro d'Italia, even if the Italian riders were not so strong, were not so top level.
So in your view, the strike on Friday, it was what we'd call a dispetto, not a respectful thing, not a good gesture.
Yeah, it was a bounty. They were bounty killers because there was no respect. It was and it showed. It was the demonstration of the cycling world. The riders don't connect each other, and the sport directors don't check the riders. The team managers don't know their teams, and the Giro d'Italia as well, and don't have any check on the fever or the feeling or the atmosphere of the race, because I think that you cannot go to the starting point and without knowing what's happening. You should know that there's something wrong. You should know that the riders are trying to shorten the stage, and so it was a loss for everybody.
Do you think that the finale we saw at Sestriere yesterday and today, that time trial in Milan, that magnificent finish at the Duomo, do you think that made up a little bit for the problems we saw on Friday?
I think that well, the last days were so good, and I think that technically talking, strategically talking, and I think that Sunweb lost the Giro d'Italia because they have two riders in the top three, and they could manage the race, but they didn't choose which rider, and maybe because Kelderman is going to another team next year, so they wasted, they wasted the race.
So
it was obvious.
Do you feel then that the race could have been different if Hindley had waited for Kelderman on the Stelvio, perhaps?
Maybe, or just release, Hindley, or make him free to make a race, to make his own race. So it was a strange behavior, and they wasted the race. They wasted the history.
So Marco, it was a good Giro, and we've seen, obviously it was a great finale. And my question now is, for Italian cycling after Nibali, is there another champion coming? Is there someone like him that we can look to on in the future? Someone maybe to rival Geoghegan Hart, Hindley, those good climbers?
Well, I think that no, we don't have another Nibali. Nibali is in his Sunset Boulevard, and he deserves our love and our respect, but it's going down, obviously. I think there are good riders. I want to say Andrea Bajoli, 21 years old. He runs for De Koenig, and he's good. Obviously, Filippo Ganna, and there are some rumors about his future. Can he become a rider for Grandi Giri, for Giro or Tour or Vuelta? I don't think so, and I fear that the transformation from a time trial man or a classic man, like a man for classics like Roubaix, like Fiandre, but not for Giro, not for Tour. It can destroy him. I like Matteo Fabbro. He's 25 years old, not so young. He's for Bora. And in this Giro d'Italia on the mountains, he shows his talent. There's another guy, very good, is still under 23. He's just 20. His name is Jonathan Milan, and he's very, very good. He's another Filippo Ganna. Very good for time trial and very good for classics. So I hope he can grow up in the best way. But we don't have at this time another Nibali. Formulo is a good rider, but nothing more. Ulissi is good for just from some stages, but not for everything. Viviani is good for sprints, but not always, not in this Giro. So the Italian situation for cycling is not so good.
Marco Pastonesi there, who just has the most beautiful accent. And let's talk, well, 6 stages down, Richard Carapaz of Ineos Grenadiers, who are having seemingly the best season they've ever had out of the flames of what we thought was happening there. Hugh Carthy of EF Pro Cycling, 18 seconds down on him. And Dan Martin of Israel Startup Nation, who seems a very canny buy now for Israel Startup Nation, 20 seconds. And it's probably worth mentioning that Primoz Roglic, the previous wearer of the red jersey of Team Jumbo-Visma, is 30 seconds down. The race started at 1 billion miles an hour, Jeremy. It was weird because it started on a very slow day for the Giro. And then suddenly you had Froome out the back, Ineos seemingly dropping him. It's been an interesting race.
Yeah, and that's what I meant earlier when I was saying about it. It's a shame that it's clashed with the Giro because I think it's deserved our full attention, and I haven't been able to give it my full attention.
But other sports do this. Other sports have games going on all the time. If you take football, soccer, depending on what part of the world you're in, they have multiple games happening at the same time.
Yeah, but OJ, these are the Grand Tours. These are not like league matches. These are the very pinnacle of road cycling. These 3 races.
It's like having 2 tests at the same time.
And I think, or 2 World Cup. You don't, when you have the World Cup semi-final, okay, in soccer, in football, you don't have the 2 matches at the same time.
You don't. But Sophie's just brought up test matches in cricket. People listening right now possibly are American. I would like you now, Sophie, in 20 seconds to explain what a test match is.
It's just a really long, boring cricket game that goes.
There you go. Very much done in 5 seconds. The race has been fabulous. I've missed the last couple of stages, I must admit. Jeremy, you keep sending me messages about Velcro and zips. What's going on?
Well, we had this whole thing, didn't we, on the Stelvio, in the Stelvio stage of the Giro, when Wilco Kelderman and Jai Hindley both had problems with their outerwear. That is to say, their kind of, there were more than rain capes. There were kind of their winter jackets, where they were handed up to them before the top of the Stelvio, I think a couple of kilometers, to allow them enough time to pull them over their shoulders, get one sleeve in, get the other sleeve in, and zip them up, and off we go down the other side, because it's a very long descent. It was very cold up there. I think it was down to kind of like 3 or 4 degrees at the summit of the Stelvio. Beautiful day, but obviously given the altitude, extremely cold, and they had to ride down a very long descent, having got very hot and sweaty in kind of not much more than a racing jersey. So hence the winter jackets, but they couldn't get them on. Kelderman finally got his on, but I think he finally did manage with the zip, but Jai Hindley didn't get the zip done up at all, did he? And he nearly crashed also trying to put the jacket on, but that was because it was quite windy up there.
I've done that. I must admit, I've tried to take a gilet off while riding, thinking I'm really cool, and then I've almost just ploughed into a lamppost.
Yeah, I think loads of people see it on TV and they're trying to replicate
it looks really easy until you realise you've got both your arms behind your back and you're riding a bike at 30k an hour. But the thing is, though, the reason that Primoz Roglic isn't wearing red is because he couldn't get a rain jacket on, and this was on a stage of the Vuelta.
Yeah, I mean, it was so we had all this on the Giro, and then the same situation seemed to replicate itself on the Vuelta when Roglic was coming down the penultimate climb, over the top of the penultimate climb before the summit finish to the stage this afternoon, in the most just awful conditions. It was bone-chillingly cold. It was driving rain. They've been riding in the rain for a very long time, and it was the kind of rain that, you know, even if you got overshoes and winter jackets and winter gloves on, it's still freezing. And anyway, so he couldn't get his jacket on, and in the end, I think he had to basically slow down to put it on, and the gap went ahead of him, and he never got back.
Was it fair of Movistar at that moment to attack? I mean, that's the question out of all of this. Was it fair of Movistar to attack?
Yes, because I think they could quite reasonably argue that it's his responsibility to make sure he's got the right kit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's you know, it's like a feeding issue. If you don't get your feeding right, if you don't get your clothing right, you know, it can cost you time. So I think it's completely legitimate. I mean, it wasn't as if he crashed. It was just his faffing around with his jacket, the same way that Wilco Kelderman and Jai Hindley were on the Stelvio. And it's quite interesting because I think there's one of the things that's happened is they're racing full tilt at great altitude, at high altitude in these mountain stages in kit that they would never normally use. I mean, when other than this season have you seen? Obviously, these are the latest Grand Tour stages we've ever seen pretty much in the history of the sport. It's consistently cold conditions, so they're wearing a lot more of the kit that they would never normally use, that they might use for winter training, but they wouldn't use in racing.
So what you're basically saying is every single one of the clothing companies that works in cycling is now going, hang on a second here. Here's an angle. Let's make a Velcro winter top.
The thing about that is that Velcro fastening on cycling kit, whether it's shoes or whether it's raincoats, has been around for years. It's nothing new. But I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's because that kind of kit, you know, really big winter gloves, which are kind of, you know, if everyone who's worn winter gloves will know they are kind of more bulky than, you know, your bare hands basically. So it is tougher fitting with a zip, particularly if your hands, your digits are freezing. And you're going downhill you know, you're coming over the summit of the Stelvio after a huge effort, and then you're going down the other side, or you're going to Formigal in the freezing rain. So I don't know, it all seems a bit like some of that kit that they're using. Obviously, it's been tested massively, but not necessarily in those extreme conditions by professionals, you know, at the key moments of Grand Tour races. So it's quite interesting. I mean, the kit seems to be becoming an increasing factor as the weather gets worse and worse.
Mm. I mean, the problem is you can't plan for every eventuality, and kit, I would guess, is designed and it is planned and it's signed off for what the cycling season is. The Vuelta is not a cold race. The Vuelta is not the race where you should be wearing a rain cape. Really, you shouldn't even be wearing anything. You should be wearing short sleeves and bottoms if you fancy it.
Yeah, no. So this afternoon, you know, it was kind of knee warmers, overshoes, winter gloves. You know,
it's a classics race. It feels like a classics race.
Yeah. It was cold. It was a little worse this afternoon than some of the stages we've seen in kind of you know, races in February in Belgium. But it is just quite interesting. Obviously, races in Belgium in February, they don't necessarily go up as high as 1,500, 2,000 meters, which they have been doing this week.
I look forward to getting an email from my favorite cycling clothing brands in a month's time saying, would you like the new Velcro winter racing top? Of which the answer is yes.
This is just clearly a blatant pitch by us to get loads of free kit, isn't it?
Yeah. Jeremy, you still were supposed to be sending me a bit of kit. You've never done that.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to ask.
Yeah, thanks. Anyway, let's just look at the top three before we wrap up quickly of the Vuelta, which is the last Grand Tour of the year. The last race of the year? There's no races after this, is there?
No.
This is it.
Right, end of the season. Yeah.
So that is an interesting top three. Richard Carapaz is wearing the red jersey. Hugh Carthy. I mean, if we're talking about young British riders who are having a great season, Hugh Carthy, will we see in this foreshortened Vuelta? Will he see him? Can he be challenging for the honours come the end of it?
I think he'd definitely be challenging for the podium the way he's riding at the moment. And there's something interesting happening at EF in the sense that they seem to be, I just seem to have more belief than they've had for a long time. I think it all stems from kind of
duck helmets.
Yeah, from the duck, and also, you know, I'm going to make a whole series of really bad jokes there, but I'm not.
Do one. Just give us a little taste. Give us a little taste.
I'll leave those to you. No,
Go on, please.
But they started. It started in February, March when they had success in Paris-Nice, and it's carried on into the Dauphiné, carried on through the Tour with Danny Martinez winning stage, and now it's carried on at the Giro and now Hugh Carthy, who I think, you know, it was kind of like people thought, yeah, he's a talented climber, I think, but is he ever going to have the personality and the kind of aggression to really flourish in Grand Tour racing? He looks more and more the deal now.
Yeah, the interesting one for me, Sophie, is Daniel Martin. Dan Martin, who is everyone's favourite rider. He's so lovely. He was in tears after he won a stage the other day because his wife is at home with the kids, and he's just a nice guy. And it's difficult to say that about a lot of riders in the peloton, but he is just a nice guy. Him sat 20 seconds down. How excited should we get about that?
I agree with everything you just said. I don't know. I think there's still a way to go in the Vuelta, but that victory, like you saw with Dan Martin, how emotional he got, I think for him, that's perhaps just reaffirmed for himself a little bit that he still had it. He still could compete. So when you've got that, I guess that confidence injection, it creates a bit of momentum. I don't know much about the team around him. I know he said that they're younger and comparatively inexperienced. But then again, like Dan Martin is someone that is used to being the lone wolf. Pardon the pun, he's at the Koenig Quick-Step. He pretty much raced for himself in terms of GC, and I think it was sort of similar at UAE. So I mean, to me, he'd still be an outsider, but personally, I'd love to see him on the podium. I think he works incredibly hard. He's one of the older guys, but you know, he's already shown us that he can still mix it on his day, and he's a savvy Grand Tour rider. I kind of like seeing him go on the offensive as well. I think in previous Grand Tours, when we've seen negative racing and Ineos sort of, had a stranglehold on it, he has sort of sat back a bit and maybe raced for a place. So I'd love to see him just throw it all out there.
That's interesting, because I've always seen Dan Martin as somebody who, when the racing is negative, throws it all at the wall and tends to ruin his own chances because he wants to animate the race.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think that he's kind of he's somebody who's clearly got massive amounts of ability, because he's most stage races that you watch that certainly have mountainous stages, he's normally in at the death. He's either there or thereabouts, or he's just not in it at all. But it's quite interesting with that team as well, because they seem to have turned a bit of a corner, Israel Startup Nation, because they obviously, Alex Dowsett won that stage in the Giro, which with the lone break, and Dan Martin won a stage the other day. Froome is coming. They're signing up a couple of other big name riders as well. There's more negotiations going on, as I understand it. So next year there will definitely be much more of a force than they have been, and they have a massively ambitious kind of program. They want to be very successful in Grand Tour racing. So I think we will see increasingly a level of professionalism and achievement in that team as well, that will bring them right up to the kind of into the top 6-8 teams.
Just a cheeky question to end this all up, because we've gone on too long, as always. Here's a cheeky question. You can go first, Sophie. You've got Chris Froome and you've got Dan Martin. Who's your leader?
I think if we've said earlier that they're signing.
No. You just that's all you've got. You got Martin and Froome. Who'd you go with? Who rides for who?
Who would I go with, or who do I think they're going to go with?
Who do you go for?
Well, at the moment, you'd go for Dan Martin, but I think they'll ride for Chris Froome.
Get off the fence, right? Who are you going for?
What?
You're in charge. You're in charge. Who you putting it? Who's riding for who?
Next year, I think it will be Dan Martin riding for Chris Froome, unless something transgresses on the road. But then again, if Dan Martin goes out and wins the Vuelta, that could be different. I'd love to see Dan Martin do what Richie Porte did at the Tour, and this kind of contradicts what I just said, and sort of sit in and let all the other teams do the work until the very, very end.
So I'm gonna get this. So who would you choose to ride for who next year? Israel Startup Nation.
I'm with Jez in that I don't think we're going to see Froome back to how he was, but I'd probably say Froome. You don't invest that kind of money in someone and then not back him in a race.
Jeremy, who would you have riding for who?
Well, I think it all depends. Again, like we touched on earlier about their marketing.
I know. Take marketing out of it.
They're not going to have Dan
but that's where they're
Martin
signing him.
Froome anyway. Like Dan Martin will do a different Grand Tour.
All right, okay. Put it this way: how many people will go to a Chris Froome press conference compared to a Dan Martin press conference?
And I get that point. Of course, I get that point. It's about the deal. That's the reason you sign. Whether Mark Cavendish wins another stage for the rest of his career or not, you sign him because you know he's got a massive social media following. You know he's a massive name. You know he can be a volatile character in the sense that he will get column inches. I totally get that. I'm just asking you, as DSs, as team principals, who you would have riding for who next year, Israel Startup Nation.
I think if they were sensible, they wouldn't have either of those two riding for each other. You'd have both in a different Grand Tour.
Oh, she's good. She's good, isn't she?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you definitely do that anyway, because I don't think Chris Froome would be able. I think, with Chris Froome, you probably set out your stall for him to be your designated leader at the start of the Tour de France. Yeah. Knowing full well that that's the biggest showcase for your brand, that's the biggest showcase for your sponsors, and that everybody would want your big name rider front. So you just focus everything. You throw the kitchen sink at getting him ready as you can get him for the Tour de France. And who knows? Depending on the route, maybe he can at some point, get into the top 5, top 3, maybe even get a stage, maybe even get a couple of days in the jersey. Personally, I don't think he can win another Grand Tour. But
I disagree with you slightly. If there was one rider of the older generation, which we can call them now, I mean, we've talked about the changing of the guards. If there was one rider of the older generation who you could see managing to come back and win another Grand Tour, it is somebody with the mentality of Chris Froome. And I think you look at what he's overcome in his career to get to where he's got anyway. I think he's got another chapter. I think there's another chapter. But hey, that's 2021 and the excitement that will come there.
You didn't answer the question, OJ. Who would you?
Sorry, guys, we've run out of time. I can't. I'd love to answer that question, but fortunately, we've run out of time. So thank you, as always, to Peloton subscribers and Aérogramme listeners. Check out lacourseontete.com for great writing, insights, and a semi-new picture of Jeremy that I'm maybe going to post later on. Don't miss our coverage of the 2021 Tour de France launch later this week on October 29th. We'll see you soon. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, OJ.
Thank you, Sophie.
I thought you weren't going to thank me then. Thank you, OJ.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks,
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, world.